Welcome to the Polygamer podcast, where gaming is for everyone. Join us as we expand the boundaries of the gaming community.
In this week's episode of Polygamer,
our game is not about cancer. It's about Joel, and it's about our family, and kind of all the ups and downs and the roller coaster of going through this experience.
That was Ryan Green, co-creator of That Dragon Cancer, currently on Kickstarter. You'll be hearing from him and co-creator Josh Larson later on in this episode. But first, welcome to Polygamer. I'm your host, Ken Gagney. It's been a tough week for us social justice warriors, especially for those women who continue to be targeted by Gamergate. Randy Harper, found on Twitter as FreeBSDGirl, and who created a Twitter block list that allows you to subscribe to automatically block all Gamergaters, has recently been threatened by somebody posting photos of himself outside her workplace and promising to go there with a knife. The person making these tweets has been posting them with his real name, which gives her an unprecedented opportunity to address this matter legally, as opposed to the anonymous threats that are often issued online, in which the first question is, who is this person? Can they actually enact this crime? I wish her first and foremost safety and security in these trying times, and secondly, success in addressing the matter. Also, Brianna Wu, creator of Revolution 60 from Giant Space Cat Studios, was recently the subject of a Patreon asking people to donate money to stop the person behind the Patreon from detailing personal information about her. This is known as extortion. I did not get to see the Patreon before it was taken down, which happened very quickly, so I don't have the details of the matter or whether or not it was intended as a joke, but these kinds of jokes aren't all that funny, and I'm glad to see it's been taken care of swiftly. Brianna recently had an excellent Tumblr post detailing her day and how from 9 to 5, all the matters that she deals with generated by Gamergate leave her almost no time to do her actual job, to pursue her career in game development. Giant Space Cat has additional games coming out, and all these distractions threaten their quality and timeliness. This is a rather obvious example of what they mean by gaming being a toxic environment for women. Why would anyone want to follow in Brianna's steps when they won't even get to do what it is they're passionate about, which is make games, and the rest of us won't get to play the games? Truly, there are no winners in a situation like this. However, there is plenty that we can do. Video game critic and YouTube personality Alana Pierce recently had the creative and effective approach of taking the attacks she is receiving and forwarding them to the attacker's mother. Now, I don't know necessarily how she is finding out the person's identity. I do not approve of doxing, whether it's pro-Gamergate, anti-Gamergate, whatever side of the equation you're on, if there are even sides. I don't think people should be doxed. What I do like about her approach, though, is that it indicates that the people that are attacking her are preteens and teenagers. These are not well-adjusted adults. These are little kids who are getting their jollies from online attacks and not experiencing any real-world consequences until their parents find out. So if the best way to get rid of Gamergaters is to get them grounded with their internet access taken away, that I am for. I think there was a joke on this subject in the recent RiffTrax Live event. RiffTrax, of course, is the comedy troupe founded by the former host of the TV show Mystery Science Theater 3000. On Thursday, December 4th, they mocked the film Santa Claus, a Mexican film that was bought by an American film producer and dubbed over in the style of What's Up, Tiger Lily, except without trying to be funny. At one point, Santa Claus says, "Let's go check in on what those three naughty boys are doing." And one of the riffers says, "They're doxing game developers." Yeah, that's pretty much it. These doxers are probably kids. Pierce's approach to this situation was brought to my attention by Val Potter, an editor at ComputerWorld.com, who recently published my feature on anti-doxing, which I indicated would be forthcoming in a previous episode of Polygamer. It is now available and details about a dozen different services, including Intellius, Pipple, and Spokio, from which you can find your personal information, including your home address, your phone number, and relatives' names and your age, and have that information removed. The story was reblogged by Lifehacker as well as Cory Doctorow at Boing Boing, and has gotten great attention online. While I in no way, shape, or form wish to engage in victim blaming, as some doxers would suggest by saying that if you don't want your information being used against you, then you shouldn't have put it out there, I do think a bit of preventive measure can help alleviate these situations. One of my Twitter followers said that Pipple found the name of her dog who died 10 years ago. That's not information you want being out there, and it's not information you put out there. You'd never ask for this information to be included in these databases. So take a moment, or actually an hour or two, and go through these databases, find your information, and get it the heck out of there. More bad news, even as I am currently recording this show, the Able Gamers website is experiencing a DDoS attack. Able Gamers is a non-profit that helps improve accessibility to games for those with mental or physical disabilities. I'd hoped to have them on this show by now, but our schedules have not aligned. However, I do hope to rectify that in 2015. I don't have the details about this attack right now, but it seems that they turned down a donation due to the source of the funds. I don't know what those funds were at this time, but apparently that refusal was met with scorn by somebody who decided to attack a charity for people with disabilities. Good job, guys. In happier news, I was recently one of 7 Lightning Talk speakers at the monthly meeting of the Women in Games Boston group. That group can be found at wigboston.wordpress.com. I gave a talk about this very podcast, Polygamer, and how it was founded and what I hope to achieve with it. And while I appreciated the opportunity to plug that work, the real benefit for me that evening was from meeting the many excellent and awesome people who are in the audience and also giving talks. People who have been on this show, like Khadija Marenkov, and other friends like Emma Clarkson. One of the speakers, Anthony Russo, mentioned that he went to WPI, and I figured, well, I'll work that into my talk as well, because I went to WPI, might as well make that connection with my audience. I didn't realize that there was an entire gaggle of students from WPI attending that very evening. They belong to the WPI Game Development Club, or GDC, which I believe was in place when I was a student there more than a decade ago. However, there is also now an interactive media and game design major, which was not there during my tenure, and it seems that there is even now an equality and diversity in games group at WPI. I'm super excited to meet the organizers of this event and learn more about them and perhaps attend some of the meetings. Okay, enough updates. Let's get to this week's interview with Mr. Ryan Green and Josh Larson, co-creators of That Dragon Cancer, an empathy game or serious game about the creator Ryan Green's son, Joel. Joel was diagnosed 4 years ago with brain cancer, and 2 years ago that cancer was determined to be terminal. Around that time, Ryan and his family decided to create a video game that captured these difficult experiences, from diagnosis to caretaking. The game has been in development for 2 years, during which time Joel sadly passed away this past March. However, progress on the game continues and is currently on Kickstarter. At the time that this episode goes live, on Wednesday, December 10th, 2014, the Kickstarter still has 2 days to go. However, it has met its fundraising goal of $85,000, and will be releasing in 2015 for Windows and Mac via Steam, and for the Ouya Android game console. The developers gave me private access to an early demo of the game that features 2 of the 12 levels. This is certainly not the kind of game that you grind or speedrun. This is a very thoughtful art house game where you play from a first-person perspective. Some levels have you in a park watching Joel play on a playground. Others have you in a doctor's office receiving some bad news. You're almost always in a first-person perspective, and the environment is very abstract and very fluid, often capturing not just the physical reality of the moment, but also the challenging emotional turmoil that one experiences in response to such difficult situations. And it is a difficult game. This is not a game that anybody enjoys playing. I've read about people who play this at noisy environments like E3 or PAX, and who are made extremely uncomfortable by the game. I played it in the privacy of my own home, and it was still really challenging. That doesn't sound like a game that's fun. That doesn't sound like a game that you want to play. But in much the same way, Saving Private Ryan is not just a good or bad movie, it's an important movie. This is something that I discussed last week in my other podcast, IndieCider, about the game This War of Mine, a recent indie game that shows what it's like to be a civilian in a war-torn part of the world. That is not a game that you want to play, it's a game you have to play. It's a very good game that shows the reality of a situation, and in this interview with Joel's father, Ryan, and his co-creator of the game, Josh Larson, they talk about why they made the game and who the game is for. So just as in my interview with Russ Pitts and Susan Arndt, there will be 2 voices you'll be hearing besides my own. The first one is that of Ryan Green. Most Polygamer interviews I edit to make sure that both the guest and the interviewer sound as smart and as eloquent as possible without changing the content or meaning of the discussion. In this episode, I did even less editing, because this is a very difficult subject with a lot of long pauses and a lot of thoughtful responses, and I didn't want you thinking that this is a topic that we discuss easily or glibly. This is very possibly the most challenging interview I've ever conducted, and I really appreciate Ryan and Josh giving their time during a Kickstarter, which can be very demanding on one's schedule, to come on this show. If you would like to find links to the Kickstarter or any other games or resources mentioned in this episode, those can all be found at polygamer.net. where you can also send feedback or leave a comment. Thank you, as always, for listening. Joining me for today's episode of Polygamer is Mr. Ryan Green and Mr. Josh Larson, co-creators of That Dragon Cancer. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Let me start by offering my condolences on your loss. When I first heard about That Dragon Cancer from Jen Frank's article a few years ago, it seemed like such a hopeful game, a reaffirming game, even defiant. And it seemed so surprising when the news came this past March that Joel had passed, because games are something you're supposed to win, and this just didn't seem expected at all. And his life has touched many more people through your work, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
We all know a little bit about Joel from the story of the game and from having tried some of the demos. Can you tell us a little bit about himself as he exists outside the game? What was he like? Do you have any particular favorite memories?
Joel was gentle. I think that's one of the things that sticks out most to me, is that I've said before that Joel spent more time on my lap than all my other children combined, and my favorite thing with him was just to hold him and to just sit with him, and he just kind of melted into me, and I just loved that. And Joel loved to laugh, and he loved to dance. He loved music and horses and dogs and bubbles and just the simple things, simple interactions. Joel was rather delayed developmentally, and because of that, he never really formed a large vocabulary, and so, my interactions with him were more of a 1 or 2 year old than a 5-year-old. But that didn't lessen my love for him. I think if anything, his limitations really caused me to love him more and deeper. And I had just a great affection for Joel. So yeah.
He sounds like a very atypical toddler.
Yeah, he was very special.
Now, just like Joel, I have 3 brothers and no sisters, and I know that sibling rivalry can be strong. Do your other sons ever complain that you're not making games about them?
No, not at all. And I think, Josh, how do you see our children treat each other?
Yeah, I am pretty amazed by their interactions with each other. I've witnessed a lot of families interact, just like anybody else, and they are very affectionate toward each other and loving toward each other. And every once in a while they're like, "Oh, I want to play this game or do this thing," but they definitely don't fight like a lot of other toddlers I've seen, and they're just very loving toward each other. And I'd like to think that part of the reason is because they've all had to help with just with family tasks, and then also understanding that Joel doesn't have all of the same abilities as other toddlers, and just being able to understand and accept that that they can still love him anyway, and that causes them to love each other more, I think.
Yeah, I think they look out for each other, which I think is what's special. So there's been no jealousy, and in fact, Caleb, our oldest, he's 9, and wanting to get into game design and game development, and just lamenting the fact that he doesn't know Unity better because he would love to be able to contribute more to the project. Joel's sickness was most of their known life. He got sick when I think they were, 3 and 5, 2 and 4. So that's been their known existence and interaction with their brother. Is Joel's always been sick. So yeah.
That diagnosis came so early, and you started working on the game a few years ago, and you had also written a song, and I believe I read that you filmed a short film and wrote a book called He's Not Dead Yet.
Mm-hmm.
what are you hoping to accomplish with that dragon cancer that is unique to that medium?
I think that answer didn't come till later in the project, after Joel passed this March. And that was just that video games give us the closest approximation of how it was to be with Joel. I can tell you about Joel. I can show you Joel. But my hope is that we can show you what it was like to be with Joel. And I find that unique to video games.
Yeah, I think, like if you think about all these different media and, what's kind of like the natural thing to do, with like a film, the easiest thing to do is grab a camera and sit down with people and just have a conversation, right? So it makes sense that in a short film, you would show the family and how they interacted, or, in a documentary or whatever. And then in a book, you would focus on the writing and illustration. And in a video game, obviously, that is related to interactions and, rich media, audio, video, how those come together, and just creating like an atmosphere due to the immersion of video games. I think all of that kind of can be utilized to create a space to be with Joel and also to kind of explore the emotions and the all of the themes that go with what it means to be on that journey.
Yeah, I think the word for me is presence. I think video games give you a presence, and I think that's special.
Now, there are some people who might overlook the experience and get caught up in the semantics of what makes that dragon cancer a game. And I know, Ryan, you've written about that on the website Game Church. Some people would say a game has to have rules, or it has to be something that you can win. What definition of a game are you using?
Personally, I'm using the definition that life is qualifies as a game. That you spend most of your life trying to live and get life, and you do that through working within the rules and the systems of this world. So I see video games as our closest like artistic analog to life, and I think that that's unique. I think even something, like the demo that Jen Frank wrote about was about Joel's getting dehydrated and was very sick and was vomiting juice and couldn't be consoled. And even in that space, there are rules and mechanics that we all do to try to comfort our children. And so my question is just that, like in real life, what happens when those mechanics aren't enough? What happens when those laws don't give you the life that you were hoping for? And I say life as in kind of like in a general sense, not a specific sense. So yeah, I think that video games offer us that kind of unique ability to mirror life. And so I don't really have much of a use for the definition of video game because I think that we can find pieces of that in all aspects of our life, and this is just a way to express that. So I would say we'd focus more on experience, but this is and there are little games along the way, just like there are little games that you play in life, and certainly interacting with Joel often was through play and through games, and so that's how you interact with Joel in the game.
Josh, anything to add to that? You have quite the experience as a software developer, I understand.
I've gotten super design nerdy on my blog before, and I guess I like Ryan's answer, so I'll just leave it at that because I'm afraid I would get super nerdy if I tried to really answer it.
Oh yes, our audience hates nerds. That would not fly. So there have been a lot of attempts over the years to address disease through video games. Going back 21 years ago, there was Captain Novolin for the Super Nintendo, which was about diabetes, and more recently, there was, of course, Zoe Quinn's game Depression Quest, which just came out last year. Was there any particular game that you looked at as a model to say, this is the kind of game we want to make, or this is a way in which we want our game to be different?
I would say that from my perspective, it seems like when people hear, oh, this is how we can use video games to help people, it's usually from the perspective of, this is how we get people to comply better with the things that we want them to do. And so a lot of times, well, maybe not a lot of times, but in the cases that I've seen, like for instance with cancer games, there are games that try to increase compliance with youth and teenagers through kind of empowering them. And I think that's great. And I think if it allows them to, because one of the hardest things with teenagers is I've heard, is getting compliance with some of the protocols, because they're so hard and they cause so much pain. And so if it offers them escape, if it offers them empowerment, if the goal is to increase clinical compliance, those are all noble things, but they're not really what I'm interested in as a designer. What I'm interested in is the story of disease and how it affects a person in all aspects of their being. And I think, video games are a unique way to do that. So really there wasn't an inspiration on what to do. I think as we've gone along on this project, I've tried to intentionally play other games that deal with empathetic subjects, or like playing Papa and Yo, or Heavy Rain, or some of these other kind of narrative-based story games. So yeah, I think that my intention is not to teach you or to cause you to comply, or really even to intentionally teach empathy at all the hard things that we had to go through, but it's more of just it's kind of I hope for a personal connection. I hope that it's more like, I've written before, like inviting you into this garden that I've made, or this garden that I'm living in, and just talking to you and sharing my heart, within the context of something that's a really heavy subject. So there's no really, overt scientific or socio-political intent behind what we're doing. And I think that makes us rather unique.
So who would you say you were making this game for, then?
I think that changes as we go along. I think, originally it's just... I think the people that are going to relate the most, honestly, is parents. And I think everybody can relate to those things that cause us to fear. I think as a parent, one of your biggest fears is losing your children, And we spend a lot of time thinking that we can protect them. And so, yeah, I think through this, it's kind of addressing that fear and then asking, then what? So I think that those are the ones that are going to relate the most to what we're exploring. But I think everybody can relate to it, because we're tackling that problem of the pain of innocence, and it's a question I don't have all the answers for, but I think it's worth addressing and worth working through, and it's something that that we've been forced to do, but I think in the middle of it we've seen a lot of grace. And we've shared a lot of pain, but we've also seen joy in the midst of our suffering. And I think that's important to share.
You've written that one of the things you don't want to show in the game is the suffering of children. You don't want anybody to come away hurt by having played this game. But it is nonetheless a very difficult subject, and when I played the game last night, it was very difficult, and I responded to it very strongly, and I had trouble sleeping last night.
Mm.
So, what do you mean when you say you don't want to hurt people? I mean, obviously you don't, but this is a difficult subject.
It is kind of a tough balance because, like, on the one hand, you want to be honest and authentic, but on the other hand, like, there was still a lot of joy, and we want to show who Joel was. And so, yeah, it's kind of a fine line to walk, I feel like.
I think it goes with artist intent. Hopefully, is that my intent is not to like punch you in the stomach and then drag you through the mud and then leave you there. I think that if we've experienced pain, then we're not the only ones that experience pain. And the more I learn and the more stories I hear of other people's stories of chronic illness, we in proportion didn't suffer the same way that other people suffered. And Joel didn't suffer the same way that other people suffered. And so I think in society, it's hard to talk about these things because they do hurt and they do dredge up that fear and they do dredge up that dread. And they do all of that stuff. And so we don't like to talk about it. But it's something that almost everybody that you would talk to would have a story about those moments that they experienced that level of pain. And so I don't think it's something that we should ignore or deny. And so, if it's a matter of like, yeah, like I've shared in that pain too, let's weep together. I think that that's a good thing. I think that feeling and processing hard things is good. If somebody doesn't want to go there, I don't really want to force them. And so it always remains, an invitation. But I think within the game design, it's hard because, one thing you didn't play was the scene that Jen Frank played, which is the dehydration scene, and it involves hearing cries of a child that you can't stop. And for that, I think I take for granted that having gone through it, that puts us in a different place than those people that have not gone through it. And so it's this, like Josh was saying, this balance of like it doesn't hit me the same way it would hit somebody else because I've gone through it. And so like that scene represents 6 hours of my life where Joel was in a lot of pain and I was at the end of myself. And so I'm asking the players to sit with me through 10 minutes of that. And that's a big ask. And I acknowledge that. And I'm very it's very sobering. And it was especially sobering the first time anybody played the scene because I was like, oh no, like, holy cow, I just like ripped their heart out and I didn't realize I had that power, And so at that point it's just like, okay, I'm holding your heart. What do I do with it? And it's like my intent as an artist is not to just squeeze tighter. My intent as an artist is to say, okay, I've shared in this pain and you've shared in this kind of pain. So therefore what? What comfort do we have? What comfort have we received? And let's work through that as well. So that's what I mean by not really wanting to hurt people. And in the scene of dehydration, I have no interest in showing Joel's avatar. Hearing it is plenty. And even hearing it for some people is too much. And so there are places where I don't want to show the distress because I don't think it's necessary. And I think it would be a little obscene. And I think within a team, we all have different lines on where that is. And so that's the thing that we wrestle with, is where to push and where to pull punches, in the design process.
Josh, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of our intentions is to try and communicate the hope and the joy of the Green family. And so it's kind of easy to look at some of the content in the game and to assume like the entire game is going to be super depressing. But that's only part of the story. So I guess we're just kind of hoping that people will trust us that when they play the full game, it'll be a journey that, while it's emotionally difficult, ultimately it feels like you're better for having played it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one other thing for us is that at the beginning of the game, I've noticed that people have different reactions to it. You're in a park and you're playing with Joel, and a lot of people that know the story find a lot of sadness in it. And my hope is that that they realize that sadness is not a unique, distinct feeling. That sadness is also mixed with joy and happiness and laughter and all those different things, and it's part of the complexity of the human experience. And so I think that when you mix joy and hope with sadness, that it creates something much richer and worth exploring and worth sitting in a little bit, because I think it represents what gives our lives meaning, is how we go through pain and how we respond to it, and how we memorialize and remember the people that changed our lives and the way that we look at the world.
I think I played 2 scenes last night. Sounds like Jen Frank played another, and I understand there are 5 total. Is that all correct?
In the final game, there will be about 12.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And are all those scenes based on specific episodes or incidences in your life?
They're all inspired by real things. A lot of times we use symbolism to represent different things, and other times we'll use like say a home video, footage from a home video, and take that situation and put it into more of a fantastical setting, and then and add to it from there. And so there are places where it's the movement and the attitude and the voice and the intent is all there, but it's set in a more fantastical setting. So I would say it's not direct autobiography, it's not a direct memoir or a documentary, but it certainly has all those elements in it as we go through the experience. And so you'll experience what it is to be with Joel and what it is to go through treatment with him in more of a symbolic way, because 4 years of treatment is brutal, and there's so many ups and downs and so many roller coasters that you really have to focus in on what it is that's important, and what you can draw from that experience. And so some experiences are composite from a lot of different experiences all combined into one scene. And so what we've tried to do is mix dramatic prose and poetry with kind of reenactment, with home video, audio, and kind of mix it all into something that creates hopefully a narrative arc that people can walk through. So
it took me about 20 minutes to play those 2 scenes. That's about 10 minutes per scene. If I wanted to do a speed run, I probably could have done it faster. Mm-hmm. With 12 scenes, I'm guessing the game takes about 2 hours to play through?
That's our goal.
Okay, so you're compressing 4 years into 2 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's what I was most struck by, well, maybe not most, but one of the things I was struck by was how poetic the game is, especially in its visual representation. It's very abstract at times, where I'm playing in a first-person perspective and I glance away at something, and when I come back, there is someone or something there that wasn't there before, or things have changed, or they change slowly so I can see them changing, and suddenly I was in a doctor's office and now I'm in a raging sea storm. Looking at some of the early art from early press you received on this game, it looks like the game has actually gotten more abstract, where the character models are less defined and more vague. Why the decision to move in that direction?
I think one thing that you're seeing is my growing as an artist. I've always been interested in doing visual art and only had limited opportunity to do it. And so this was the first time I took the opportunity to jump fully in. And so the book, the He's Not Dead Yet, was my first heavy foray into 3D. And so what you see there and in some of the early concepts is me trying to learn how to make faces and how to do things correctly, and learning how to model and learning how to render and all this stuff. And Josh told me once that I was very brave for which means, you're not there yet, Ryan, but good job, good effort. And I think that that's the thing, is recognizing my limitations as an artist and wanting to do something that's effective and not distracting. And some of the early models of Joel are very distracting, and some of the early models of me are very distracting because they can't approach the fidelity that's necessary to express such subtlety in emotion. And it's that classic problem of the uncanny valley. I don't want to attempt to cross it because I have no ability to do that. And so a lot of times it's about finding the art style that best expresses what it is that you want to convey. And we found that no faces was actually still very effective in conveying emotion, surprisingly. And I think it's because we have such a good audio guy. John, our composer and audio mixer and sound design pro and programmer, he implements a lot of the soundscapes and has a studio in his house and allows us to kind of take the audio production to the next level. And so I feel like in that we can go more abstract in our visual representation and still be able to convey the emotion effectively, which is what's important about what we're doing, is that it is so raw, it is so personal, that I would rather the player not get distracted by the plastic face of a video game avatar. So we found that people that, like when you're watching it, when you're interacting with it, like at least for us, we assign emotions to it, and it doesn't really make a difference that we don't have a facial expression system.
In Scott McCloud's book, Understanding Comics, he suggests that the less defined a character model is, the more it serves as a template for the consumer to impress himself into the story and allow them to be more interactive. So that might be why people, when they play Pac-Man, they say, I'm going through a maze, instead of Pac-Man is going through a maze.
I think where I differ a little bit theologically in video game design is that I don't think that we make our characters empty templates. I think we need to give our characters strong characterizations and strong voices. And so while I think you can assign yourself physically, I do believe that having a stronger point of view in your characters helps people connect to it more than leaving it blank. So
that's just kind of like the idea that that the character is still its own person, but it's something that you relate to and empathize with as another person instead of as you.
Ryan, you mentioned that was a theological difference that you have, and faith is certainly very important to you. How does that manifest itself in the game, or where or how would players see that in the game?
Faith and spirituality is something that I can't separate from my daily life. It's part of me, and it's not something that I don't see a division of secular and spiritual. It's just all spiritual. So to me, removing that from the game, I think would do a disservice to the story that we've gone through and how faith has played a role in our fight with Joel, and in the experience of where is our hope and how do we deal with these hard things. And so I think the differences from probably most Christian media that you might run into is that our intent is not a Sunday school lesson. It's it's an expression of our story and how we see things and what we struggle with. I would say it's more has more in common with the Psalms than anything else, because some of it's lament, and it's wondering, where God is, and struggling through those problems of pain and suffering and hope and eternity and just all that stuff. And so when you go through something like this, it changes you, and it causes you to really look at yourself and look at what you believe, and that walk is something that I want to express, and also the reason that we wanted to start this project in the middle of our battle. Obviously our hope was that we would see a miracle and that we'd be able to talk about that. And now we are talking about what it is to live in the aftermath of losing your child. And so I think that there's value in expressing all of that in the middle of the journey, because afterwards, a lot of times people take their experience and they package it up into a neat package, and then they say, here's how you replicate it. And I don't believe that as much as I used to. And I think that the spiritual journey is very personal, and it's unique for everybody, because I believe that our spiritual journey is about finding connection and relationship with God. So hopefully this expresses that in a way that I think anybody, spiritual or aspiritual, can relate to. We had once a journalist that was proclaimed atheist and said that even he could understand why you would pray in that moment. And I think that those simple human connections are important to serve as a way that we can talk about how we're alike and similar and how we can relate to each other, rather than how we're different. So.
Yeah, I think ultimately the game is kind of sharing the journey that they've been on, and part of that just includes a testimony of what's happened and what they have gone through, and that includes how you consider God in all of that. And if you were to read Joel's blog, where Amy has 900 posts or whatever, you can tell that faith is simply just part of how you see the world if you're a religious person or a spiritual person. And so it makes sense to me that would be in the game, because otherwise the game is has a big hole in it. If it's not there, it's just not very authentic. So I think that's a big intention that the whole team has, is to try and make this an authentic experience. So.
No, I can appreciate that. I've met people who have lost faith, and they sometimes describe it as having a hole, and so having a game without that, I can see how that would be similar.
Yeah.
This game has been in development for years, and it is currently on Kickstarter. I was actually a little surprised when it went on Kickstarter, because I've been hearing about the game for so long. I assumed it was done, and I just missed it. But it actually still is in development. It's coming out mid-2015. So after so many years of development, what prompted you to go to Kickstarter?
We started the game actually roughly 2 years from now. I think it was early November 2012. When we started. So it's been just over 2 years. We started working on it self-funded, and it was, I think, maybe five months or something like that by the time we had an actual video game demo. And we started sharing it with people at the Game Developers Conference in 2013. And that's where we met several game industry people, started sharing it with them, and kind of kept in touch. And then eventually we announced that we would be partnering with Ouya, and we got significant funding from them and it was really an amazing thing because we could tell that they were great people to work with, and one of the reasons they told us that they wanted to support us was because it felt like the right thing to do, and that is an amazing thing to hear from somebody in the industry that wants to support you in that way, instead of just thinking about the money or whatever. So that was amazing. And so our intention was to continue development and release it, but like we mentioned on the Kickstarter page, the story was continuing to evolve and change, and the game kind of evolved with that. And so now the game is kind of bigger than the original vision, and kind of better matches the story of their journey as it is now. And so that basically meant that we needed another portion of funding to continue development, and part of that goes to just finishing out the last few scenes that we have. I think there's like 2 or 3 scenes or something like that we still have to build, and then the rest of it is just polishing it to the level that we feel like is appropriate for the vision that we have. And we really debated for a long time which direction to go in, and a lot of people suggested Kickstarter. Obviously we thought about that, and the more we thought about it, the better idea it seemed like. There were a lot of people that just wanted this project to exist, and that's part of Kickstarter's culture. And it's also just a way for us to include other people's stories in the game and kind of give them a platform and a voice, so that the game can be richer as a result, and just better represent that the Green family is part of a larger community who've all dealt with this.
Yeah, and I think for us, like, independence was a pretty big core value of ours in this project, and really as collaborators, is that our hope is to tell personal stories from a distinct voice in the things that we make. And so we had been able to come this far with the help of Ouya on remaining independent, and having that independent voice, and Kickstarter gives us the opportunity to continue that. So that's another reason why we pursued Kickstarter is for that. And then also because once we landed on that, we realized, this is a way that we can share our platform that we've been given with other people. And so, along with helping us getting this project made, we're also asking for people to contribute their voice to what we're doing. And we had a little taste of that last year at PAX when we invited people to send us art of the day that they faced that dragon. And we printed it out, and when people would donate to Extra Life, or through Children's Miracle Network through Extra Life, then we'd give them a poster print of with an artist statement of what was represented in that photo. And what I loved is just the diversity of voices of and interpretations of that dragon that we got. And so I kind of want to continue that process into the game, where you see a variety of voices represented, because cancer is something, and death in general, and that whole struggle for life is something that we all share. And so it seemed appropriate.
And the Kickstarter seems to have been well received. At the time of this recording, you're about 89% funded. You've achieved $71,000 of your $85,000 goal, so it looks like you'll be meeting your goal. Obviously, the response has been spectacular, but are there any particular responses that have surprised you? Did you think that it would generate this level of support, or have people come out with any particular stories about why they're supporting you?
Yeah, we've been overwhelmed and very grateful. I think the thing that surprised me the most is other families that have gone through similar situations, have lost children, that want to add their voice to what we're doing, and feel like it represents them in a way. And that's been really special. And even we had somebody commission us to do a piece for them based on a photo, and they sent us the photo, and it was just like a personal moment with them and a child that they had lost, and it just struck me in a new way, like the heaviness of what it is that we're doing and what it represents. I think when you're in the middle of it, you kind of, being in the middle of it, you just get through it. And you have a tendency to just do what you need to do to get through it. And sometimes pausing and looking at other people's pain, it just strikes you in a whole new and a raw way. And I just had that moment in this Kickstarter where it was like, wow, like this is real, and this is not just it's not just our story and our loss. It represents so much more. And so to me, it was just even more of a, it's not a heavy weight, but it's a weight of just like
significance.
Yeah. That I didn't anticipate. And those moments kind of reset you when you're kind of on your mission to express something, So.
No, this is a game that is very much resonating with a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and I'm sure you've seen some of that at events like GDC and PAX, and now even more so on Kickstarter. I understand you also procured funding from the Indie Fund, and if I understand correctly, that is more of a loan that you need to repay. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So this game will be sold on Steam and Ouya for, what, like about $15?
Yeah, 15 will be our target. And, as you pointed out, we are taking half of our budget to finish the game is a loan. And so, our hope is to honor those people that have loaned us that money and pay them back. And also, this doesn't just represent our investment. This represents the investment and sacrifice of a lot of people. And so, we want to be able to honor that. And, for us, we really believe in the medium, and for Josh and I, we would love to be able to work in this space for as long as possible. Our goal is to continue to create and to continue to make games. And so, this isn't a one-off thing for us. The one thing that we found in the indie community is that people invest and reinvest into the indie community. And we see that through the Indie Fund. I mean, their whole reason to be is to make indie developers financially independent. And we think that's really important, especially for all of us. I mean, most of the people on our team have children and families. And so, this is our occupation. So yeah, for all those reasons, that's why we've pursued it the way that we pursued it, and why we'll be selling it once we launch.
And I understand that there is also not just the game coming out next year, but also hopefully a documentary called Thank You for Playing. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? Did these filmmakers just approach you out of the blue?
Yeah, David Osset, he approached us last year, July of last year, and saw a one-line mention of us in Kill Screen Daily, and was really interested in talking to us. And so we met with them, and we liked what they had to say, and they came out and spent a week with our family and started that process. So, it's a documentary that's completely independent of us, and produced by David and Malika, and so it will be interesting to see. I look forward to seeing it as well, because I don't know what it's going to be like. Yeah. It documents the last 9 months of Joel's life and the process of our team making and showing the game, and what that experience was like. So,
yeah, it's been really interesting to see them get more involved in this story and what kind of perspective they have. And I don't think, I don't think anybody on the team has really seen any part of the film. So we are all in the dark and have no idea like the exact story that they're going to tell. But I don't know. It seems like they're very talented and know how to tell a good story. Yeah. So
it's very interesting because there, to a small degree, is a quality of documentary to the game you are making. It details an experience that you've had, and now this is a documentary about a documentary.
Yeah. The meta nature of it is not lost on anybody.
Yeah.
I think if you go any deeper, time will slow down. Now, if somebody were to come to me and want to make a film, I would want to see what they had done before as a testament to their ability to convey that story. Mm-hmm. It looks like the two artists working on this project, Thank You for Playing, have worked on a previous documentary, or at least Malika has, called Call Me Kuchu. So I assume that you probably have some experience with that film through your relationship with these filmmakers. What was it about their ability to tell a story that you saw in that film that made you think this is going to be a good pairing for our story as well?
Mm-hmm. Actually, we didn't see their films right away. Most of our interaction with them was just talking to them and meeting them and feeling comfortable with that, and maybe seeing like a teaser trailer for David's film that came out last year called Building Babel. And that was about the building of the Ground Zero Mosque. And so I think what we saw in both filmmakers was that they let the subjects kind of speak for themselves. And we like the way that they make, having seen the films now, and I'm just struck by, they just, I like the way that they make documentary films. They let the subjects tell their own story, and that was important to us. There's not really an agenda in their filmmaking. They let you kind of make your own bed, and in a certain way, that's kind of terrifying because while you are the subject of the documentary, you always have your guard up, but you don't always have your guard up, and so I think that's what's special about documentary filmmaking, is that it shows people for who they are, and I think that not everybody. I'm dealing with the fact that maybe not everybody will like who I am. I hope they do. Or they might think, at best ill-informed, or, at worst delusional. But I think what's important is that we be willing to share our hearts with each other. And I think the way that you start that is by sharing your heart first. And so when you do that, you kind of start that conversation. And that's what we found in the game too, is that by sharing my heart first, people want to share their heart with us. And I think that's evidenced by the support of the Kickstarter, that people, they believe in what we're doing, and, that we're supported by just a wide variety of people in the indie game space, and in the industry as large. And we really value that. We value being part of that, and we value having a seat at the table in the games culture. So it's very precious to us.
Well, I think the community really values what you do, and it's very brave of you what you've done. One of my heroes has always been Christopher Reeve, because when he suffered his tragedy, some celebrities may have just gone into hiding or become recluses and dealt with their pain and their tragedy very privately. But instead, he took it as an opportunity to become an advocate and speak for so many who were not being heard. Your decision to take this tragedy and share it in a way that other people can empathize with and experience and learn from, I think that's something that really resonates, and I really admire you for doing it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
People who want to try this game, who have not yet been to one of your events or one of your demos, where can they do that? Will you be at other events coming up in 2015?
Yes. Many of those events kind of depend on if we get in through the submission process. And so in certain cases, we just have to wait until we get the thumbs up or thumbs down from the festival. But some of the ones that we are hoping to be at, we're hoping to be at PAX East and South by Southwest, PAX Prime, and Games for Change as part of Tribeca. So those are ones that we're hoping to be at. So we'll see. As far as being able to play the game, the only thing we're really offering to the public right now is through the Kickstarter. We do have a tier for playing the original demo scene, kind of remastered for what it will look like in the final game. And that's one way that people can play it. But otherwise, we're keeping kind of a tight lid on it, hoping to, kind of surprise people a little bit with what it's like. I think people get an impression based on the way that people have written about it. I've seen some people write that most of the game takes place in an ICU, and in fact, none of the game takes place in an ICU. So I think that there's some perspectives on how we're going to tell a story and some assumptions about where we're going that I hope to surprise people with, because like we said, our game is not about cancer. It has cancer in it. It's about Joel, and it's about our family, and kind of all the ups and downs and the roller coaster of going through this experience. So you have some really fantastical moments and some really playful moments and some funny moments and some sad moments, and it's all mixed together. So yeah, all that to say, not yet, but hopefully soon.
And you said that this is not a one-off for you. This is your profession. When this game is done, then what? Not just for you as a career, but just for this story. What happens next?
Yeah, obviously we want to share this game with as many people as possible. So we'll probably be working on it for a while, even after our initial release. So yeah, we'll definitely be doing that. And hopefully we still have a couple surprises that we can share with people even after our initial release. Another thing is, when we went to GDC and shared our demo, we had a vision for the game that was kind of half real life story of the Greens and half this fantasy allegorical world. And a lot of our early concepts on our That Dragon Cancer website had that other part of the game in it. And we essentially scrapped that entire half of the game based on feedback that we got from designers and game industry people, because they didn't fully understand it at that point, since we hadn't fleshed out the vision as much. And we would love to work on that half of the game, which is kind of more of a universal story rather than just one family. So we would like to do that. We obviously we can't commit to that 100% right now, but we would definitely like to explore the world of Tell-El and a community of people struggling and trying to find hope in the midst of that struggle. Yeah,
I think if I were to describe it, it'd be, what would happen if a remote town was inundated with refugees, and because that town had had healing power inside of its walls, and how would the people react to that, to all the new people that needed help and needed love and needed healing, and were refugees from wherever they came from. So I feel like that whereas our story right now is about a personal story about one family, this next story would be, how do we treat each other as a community, and how do we gather around each other to bear each other's burdens rather than just our own. And so those are the themes that we're really interested in exploring.
If people want to follow any potential future progress you have on that idea or others, where can they follow you or sign up for emails?
Right now, just through thatdragoncancer.com. We are still, the ideas around our studio are still kind of being formed. And so we're not ready to announce that yet. But yeah, certainly through thatdragoncancer.com and our Twitter, Ryan Green 8 and God at Play. And then we have also a Facebook page for That Dragon Cancer. So that's where they can follow us.
Very good. Well, I, as I've said, I appreciate everything you've done for the community and through this project, and I certainly appreciate the time you've given to me today for the Polygamer podcast. I look forward to seeing the Kickstarter succeed and to seeing the game come out in 2015.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Ryan.
Yep.
This has been Polygamer, a Gamebits production. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback at polygamer.net.
After so many years of development, what prompted you to go to Kickstarter?
Josh, why don't you take that because there's a train here.